Who whispered in the shadows while the town slept? Who crossed the line where law ended and desire began? Who hid secrets behind sealed doors and perfumed chambers? Candlelight flickered against dark wooden beams, casting long, trembling shadows. Footsteps echoed in empty hallways. A ledger lay open with names that shivered even in ink. Rumors slid like ice across whispered conversations. What truths did the elders dare not tell? What sins hid beneath pious words? Now, comment on the name of your lovely country where you are watching this video if you truly love your country. Every shadow hides a secret. Every seal may conceal betrayal. Are you ready to witness the shame behind Reverend Parris? The town whispered. The meeting house doors groaned under unseen weight. Ledger pages rustled as if alive. Perfume lingered too long in empty chambers. Flames flickered against dark wood, shadows twisting. Who truly controlled desire under the guise of piety? The secrets of Reverend Parris were only beginning to bleed into Salem's fragile order. Reverend Parris was the town's moral compass, or so they believed. Behind the pulpit, his sermons thundered, preaching purity and obedience. Yet, in his private quarters, another story was written, one without ink, but etched in fear. Young girls, daughters of prominent families, were summoned under the guise of confession. Wooden doors closed, muffling faint cries. Candlelight trembled, illuminating the ledger on his desk. Names, dates, odd notations, symbols that only he understood. He claimed divine guidance. The girls' testimonies became whispers in the hallways, rumors that twisted and spread like wildfire. Shadows grew longer as Parris's reputation climbed. His authority was absolute. No one dared question. And yet, some noticed patterns. Whispers spoke of perfumed rooms, of long hours alone, of strange consultations that went beyond spiritual guidance. The law, the town council, even concerned parents were powerless against the aura of godliness. Everyone feared scandal, but the ledger never lied. Its pages held hints too daring to speak aloud, implications too sharp for polite society. And in those flickering, torch-lit chambers, the lines between virtue and vice blurred, leaving a town teetering on the edge of revelation. Who would notice first? The next candlelit meeting would hold more than a sermon. It would hold witnesses to hidden sins. Rumors grew louder, creeping through Salem like a winter frost. Diaries mentioned strange visits. One maid wrote of late-night knocks and hurried confessions. Reverend Parris's ledger had grown dense with coded entries. Symbols that seemed benign to outsiders hinted at coercion, manipulation, and desire disguised as guidance. He summoned girls under varying pretenses: spiritual cleansing, private counsel, divine inspection. Footsteps echoed down empty corridors, perfumed handkerchiefs dropped unnoticed, doors locked tight. The town council remained oblivious, entranced by his fiery sermons and apparent piety. Yet, patterns emerged. The names repeated. The time frames coincided with strange absences in the household. Some witnesses reported candlelight flickering too long into the night. Whispers suggested that objects, robes, ledgers, ceremonial items were used as instruments of control, signaling favor or punishment. Parents dared not intervene, fearing both scandal and Parris's influence over public opinion. One ledger page, marked with curious notations, implied coercion, and maybe more. Some historians later reference this ledger, noting the carefully hidden line between confession and abuse. Scholars debate, was this abuse of power or simply misinterpreted ritual? But the evidence in candlelit noons tells a different story, one that chills even today. A single packet of notes lay hidden, ready to expose the extent of his manipulation. The packet emerged one cold evening, slipped under a door by an anonymous hand. Inside, entries detailed visits, schedules, and unnerving symbols, codes no ordinary townsman could decipher. Names of girls, hours spent in private counsel, repeated references to observations and favored ones. The words implied coercion, the objects implied ritual. Historians, including Miller, 1693 Diaries, and Upham, later referenced this ledger as evidence that the shadow behind Parris's sermons was much darker. The ledger, combined with whispered testimonies, suggested acts of control bordering on obsession. Torchlight illuminated the contents as officials examined it, the wax seals broken, perfumed papers spreading faint odors of cedar and rose. A candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across faces frozen with disbelief. Could this revered figure, whose sermons condemned lust and sin, truly manipulate, intimidate, and coerce under the guise of divine authority? Evidence suggested yes. Patterns became undeniable. Late-night visits, coded ledger entries, perfumed rooms, objects placed deliberately. Each signaled reward or punishment. The girls, too young to understand politics, understood fear. Silence became their shield. One witness would later confess, revealing a detail so shocking it could topple reputations in the very heart of Salem. The aftermath rippled through Salem. Reverend Parris remained, his pulpit untouched, yet the ledger and packet whispered truths few dared voice. Parents, previously silent, now observed carefully, noting the subtle manipulations, the unspoken terror in their children's eyes. The town council, though hesitant, began questioning the sanctity of absolute authority. Scholars today cite this episode as a warning. Unchecked power hides behind virtue. Objects, rituals, and ledgers can become tools of domination. The psychological grip over young minds, cloaked in religious guidance, became a case study in systemic abuse. The names once recorded in secrecy echoed centuries later, teaching historians that even in devout societies, lust and manipulation find ways to penetrate sacred spaces. Candlelight, perfumed rooms, closed doors, these were not mere stagecraft, but instruments of power. Reverend Parris's legacy became dual, preacher of faith and secret orchestrator of fear. Silence was broken, but only partially. Lessons emerged about vigilance, authority, and the dangers of unquestioned reverence. And still, the shadows whispered, waiting for the next ledger to be opened, the next secret to emerge under candlelight. The town slept uneasily, knowing whispers had teeth. The ledger, perfumed and heavy, held its secrets tight. Every shadow in Salem hinted at what remained unseen. Who would dare confront it next? What horrors lingered behind closed doors? The candle burned low, revealing only part of the truth, the rest waiting. Candlelight flickered across the meetinghouse floor. Footsteps echoed in empty corridors. A perfumed handkerchief lay abandoned. Was this a divine calling or a hidden ritual? Reverend Parris's influence deepened with every secret meeting. The town's silence masked growing unease. Who truly benefited from obedience and who paid in fear? Reverend Parris's private quarters became a theater of controlled submission. The girls, summoned for confession, entered quietly, heads bowed, hearts racing. Doors closed behind them with a hollow click. Parris watched intently, eyes sharp, assessing reactions as if performing a ritual. Objects were arranged meticulously: pewter bowls, candles, small mirrors reflecting flickering light. Each item served a purpose, a subtle signal of expectation or reproof. He dictated confessions, weaving personal questions with moral instruction. The line between guidance and manipulation was thin razor. Some notes in his ledger hinted at favoritism: times noted, items given, rooms scented with cedar or rose. Whispered rumors spread that certain girls were favored, permitted privileges others were denied. The town accepted his sermons but ignored the small signs: hurried exits, flushed faces, hurriedly cleaned floors. Parris's authority insulated him. Complaints dissolved under the weight of his piety and public influence. A subtle terror gripped the household. Obedience became instinct. Yet even the most loyal servants noticed changes in demeanor, tone, and glance. Shadows grew longer, and each candle seemed to tremble, as if sensing the secret. Who would first break the silence, revealing the dual life of Salem's most feared moral authority?
The leaked note surfaced weeks later, slipped under the door of a concerned parent. Its contents were precise: times, names, coded observations. Each entry detailed candlelit visits, prolonged consultation, and placement of ceremonial objects. Historians Miller and Upham later cited this note, noting its implications: the blurred line between religious guidance and control. Candlelight reflected off polished surfaces, illuminating marginal notes indicating approval or disapproval. Perfumed handkerchiefs and bowls became symbols of hierarchy and coercion. Some entries hinted at actions suggestive of desire, cloaked as counseling. One child's name appeared repeatedly, tied to the same room, same objects, same ritual phrases. Officials, examining the note in the dim light of the parlor, felt unease. Could a spiritual guide wield such influence over youth? The ledger reinforced the story: repeated entries, coded symbols, perfumed items, objects carefully positioned. The pattern was undeniable. Acts of coercion were implied, supported by corroborating testimonies. Even without explicit detail, the evidence suggested abuse of authority, manipulation of minors, and the creation of fear under the guise of piety. The town had placed trust blindly, not realizing the danger in locked doors and flickering candlelight. The next confession would reveal more than moral failings. It would expose a system designed to dominate. Salem began to understand the peril of unchecked authority. Parris retained his pulpit, yet private whispers challenged his influence. Parents became vigilant, observing interactions more closely, noting the lingering fear in their children's eyes. Scholars reference this as a cautionary tale. Power cloaked in virtue can manipulate, terrorize, and coerce. Objects, rituals, and small symbols are potent tools for control. Candlelight, perfumed rooms, closed doors, these details matter. Even minor signs of favoritism or punishment leave lasting impressions. The ledger and leaked note highlighted subtle yet deliberate acts of domination. Lessons extend beyond Salem. History records the dangers of absolute authority and blind trust. Public perception can shield private abuse, and societal reverence can mask coercion. Reverend Parris's sermons were heard, but his private actions whispered a different truth. Fear, manipulation, and ritualized control maintained his influence. Every child, every servant, and every parent had learned to navigate the invisible rules. The town's awareness grew, but so did the weight of silence. Candlelight faded slowly, leaving spaces between shadows, spaces filled with unspoken truths. Awareness became the first shield against hidden abuses, the only tool for navigating moral labyrinths under the guise of divine authority.
And yet, even with awareness, Salem remained on edge, wondering which candlelit doors held secrets yet untold. The ledger and leaked note sat quietly, their revelations heavy with consequence. Shadows in the meeting house hinted at the unseen. Who would dare question divine authority next? The flame burned low, casting uncertainty across the walls. Secrets lingered, and Salem waited, suspended between piety and fear, awaiting the next revelation. Footsteps echoed down the wooden hall. Shadows danced against the walls, flickering from candles left burning too long. A ledger lay open, its pages smelling faintly of cedar and wax. Could a man of God conceal such influence? The whispers grew louder, yet no one dared speak aloud. Reverend Parris's household became a microcosm of fear and fascination. Candlelight revealed careful arrangements, pewter bowls, perfumed cloths, and scattered letters indicating who had visited which room and when. The girls knew the unspoken rules, how to behave, where to glance, and when to respond. The line between confession and coercion blurred. One servant described extended consultations late into the night under the guise of spiritual guidance. Children emerged flushed, hesitant, their eyes shifting nervously as if fearing the walls themselves. The atmosphere thickened with expectation and dread. Objects like mirrors and small handbells were strategically positioned to gauge reaction, signaling whether the girl met his invisible standards. A perfumed handkerchief might denote favor. A misaligned bowl could suggest displeasure. Parris maintained a balance of terror and charm, presenting public sermons while privately testing obedience. Even the town's clergy began to notice the odd timing and meticulous preparation, though no one openly questioned the reverend. Would the next girl arrive alone, or had whispers already spread, alerting others to the danger behind closed doors? Diaries, ledgers, and whispered accounts revealed an intricate pattern. Parris's notations included times, initials, and coded marks, crossed lines, stars, and circled letters. Some suggested subtle rewards, others implied consequences. Observers later identified this as a calculated manipulation of youth. Candles burned longer during specific sessions, perfumed items arranged to trigger subconscious recognition. Witnesses described how objects, scents, and rituals reinforced his authority. Parents, initially unaware, began noticing their children's reluctance, their hesitation before private meetings. One diary noted, "She entered willingly, yet her steps faltered near the door." Candlelight played on the mirror. Her eyes reflected both fear and expectation. Historians Upham and Miller cite these records to illustrate the overlap of moral guidance and covert domination. Parris's influence was precise, ritualistic, and chilling. The objects, notes, and positions created an environment where consent was ambiguous, authority absolute, and fear internalized. These carefully orchestrated sessions blurred morality and obedience. Even townsfolk attending sermons sensed a peculiar tension, an invisible web of control. Diaries, witness statements, and town records began painting a troubling pattern. Girls reported extended hours under Parris's scrutiny, candlelight lingering far past curfew. Notations in diaries hinted at perfumed rooms and objects subtly signaling reward or disapproval. Ledger entries were cryptic, initials, dates, symbols. Historians later linked them to coercion and psychological manipulation. One entry noted favored attendance at late-night sessions. Parents remained hesitant, fearing scandal more than the unknown. Some servants whispered of unusual meetings, private conversations, careful observation, items arranged with precision. The divine counsel appeared benign to outsiders but carried undertones of control. Objects became instruments of power: mirrors, bowls, torches, and sealed letters. Perfumes lingered, masking more than scent, masking intent. Every candlelit session ended with subtle reminders of authority, each girl learning her place in the hierarchy. Rumors reached the town council, but Parris's sermons quelled concern. He wielded public admiration like a shield. Those who noticed patterns grew silent, understanding the precarious balance between spiritual guidance and covert exploitation. Evidence slowly accumulated, though hidden in shadows, waiting to be interpreted. A single leaked note would later suggest acts more audacious than anyone imagined. Could such subtle coercion go unnoticed forever?
Or would evidence emerge to expose the hidden hierarchy? A sudden note arrived at a parent's doorstep detailing dates, initials, and subtle symbols indicating which girls were called and the sequence of visits. Candlelight had illuminated pages marked with asterisks, underlines, and perfumed folds. This note, later referenced in historical analyses, implied acts of manipulation, cloaked as spiritual counseling. Each object mentioned, each session timed, suggested an invisible architecture of control. Mirrors reflected more than appearances. They reflected obedience, submission, and fear. Ledger entries corroborated the note, providing repeated mentions of girls summoned for extended guidance with carefully noted reactions. Perfumed handkerchiefs, small bells, and arranged pewter bowls became indicators of reward or reprimand, subtle yet precise. Witnesses recalled whispered instructions, small gestures, and candle positions dictating behavior. Even without explicit detail, the pattern pointed to psychological domination. Public sermons remained untarnished. Private consultations revealed manipulation, coercion, and hierarchical control. The Reverend's authority remained intact, yet a single document threatened to reveal the true nature of these candlelit sessions. Townsfolk, previously trusting, began to notice discrepancies, flushed faces, hesitant steps, and avoidance of prolonged eye contact. What would happen when these documents finally reached the eyes of those with power to confront the Reverend? The town's perception of Reverend Parris began to shift slowly. Scholars studying Salem note that power, when hidden behind virtue, can manipulate even the most devout followers. Candlelight, perfumed rooms, mirrors, and subtle gestures were not mere decor. They were tools of psychological influence. Awareness became the first defense against this coercion. Parents, servants, and observers realized the importance of vigilance, documenting behavior, and decoding subtle signals of authority. The leaked note and corroborating ledgers highlighted a structured system of manipulation, showing how objects and rituals can enforce hierarchy and fear. Public admiration cannot shield private abuse, and unquestioned reverence can mask coercion. Children learned to navigate invisible rules, while adults began to question rituals that seemed benign but carried undercurrents of control. Each candle left burning, each perfumed item arranged, was a silent testament to the Reverend's power over perception and obedience. Salem provides a historical lesson. Authority cloaked in morality can distort, terrify, and manipulate. Scholars Miller and Upham later emphasized these lessons, demonstrating how societal trust and religious devotion can conceal coercion. Observing, documenting, and questioning authority is critical to protect the vulnerable. Even minor signs of favoritism or punishment leave lasting impressions, shaping behavior long after the candle burns out. And yet, even as awareness grew, shadows lingered in Salem's hallways, holding secrets yet untold.
Candles flickered low, mirrors reflecting silent dread. Objects and rituals whispered truths long ignored. Authority cloaked in virtue still commanded fear. Salem watched quietly, learning to read subtle signs. Behind doors, perfumed handkerchiefs and arranged bowls spoke louder than sermons. The next revelation awaited those who dared question divine guidance. A cold wind rattled shutters as whispers seeped through the walls. Candle flames trembled against the dark wood, illuminating ledgers that seemed alive with secrets. Could devotion mask desire? Who watched unseen in these chambers? Silence was thick, yet the air carried stories no one dared speak aloud. Parris's authority extended beyond the pulpit. Private chambers became arenas of ritual and control. Girls entering the rooms noticed objects arranged with precision: pewter bowls, perfumed cloths, and small bells signaling expectation. Children walked carefully, guided by invisible rules and ritualized gestures. Each consultation blurred the line between confession and obedience. One servant recalled the Reverend instructing her to kneel, hands folded, while candlelight revealed subtle marks on the floor indicating position. Objects acted as silent instructors. Mirrors reflected compliance. Handkerchiefs indicated favor or displeasure, and bells subtly timed responses. Adults attending sermons were unaware, but the children carried memories of these shadowed lessons. The Reverend's presence was commanding. Public sermons showcased moral authority, yet private moments revealed a different hierarchy, where fear and obedience coexisted. Whispered instructions and ritualized movements created an environment where actions were closely observed, and every minor gesture recorded mentally in his invisible ledger. The girls quickly learned which gestures earned approval and which drew silent reprimands. Each consultation ended with a subtle cue, a mark, or a signal indicating the next step in this carefully choreographed hierarchy. Would the next ritualized consultation expose cracks in this carefully maintained authority? Historical records show patterns. Ledger entries marked with initials, symbols, and times. Candles were deliberately positioned to cast shadows, revealing small reactions unnoticed in daylight. Perfumed cloths, pewter bowls, and mirrors were arranged for psychological effect, creating a silent system of control. Diaries referenced extended counsel, sessions that lasted late into the night. Parents began noticing subtle changes, flushed faces, hesitant movements, and shifting glances. Parris's authority extended to minutiae. The placement of an object could convey favor or admonishment. Scholars Upham and Miller document coded notations indicating manipulation disguised as guidance. Even townsfolk attending sermons sensed an underlying tension, a hidden web of dominance behind public displays. Small acts like the careful folding of a handkerchief or the tilt of a mirror were enough to instill obedience. Children internalized the rules quickly, adapting to expectations without explicit instruction. The ritualized environment reinforced submission and blurred morality, transforming devotion into a psychological game. Candles, objects, and timing became instruments of power. Each session added to a growing ledger of behavior, a subtle but persistent influence. Whispered advice and silent cues carried lessons heavier than spoken words, shaping the young into compliant observers. How long could such psychological architecture remain hidden before the first true revelation surfaced? A sealed packet discovered years later revealed Parris's meticulous arrangement of sessions. Initials, symbols, and perfumed folds suggested a hierarchy of obedience. Candlelight highlighted notes indicating who had entered, when, and how each responded. Mirrors and small bells were coded indicators: favor, displeasure, compliance. Diaries corroborated the patterns, describing extended counseling sessions that left children hesitant, fearful, yet compliant. Witness accounts later indicated how subtle gestures, a hand's position, a bow, a glance, determined approval. The arrangement of objects created psychological tension, amplifying submission. Even without explicit details, the evidence pointed to manipulation. Public sermons remained untainted, yet behind doors, rituals and notes constructed invisible power lines. Historical analysis by Upham notes how candle positions and perfumed items served as psychological instruments, reinforcing authority and hierarchy. The packet, discovered decades later, connected ledgers and diaries into a comprehensive record, revealing a system designed for control rather than guidance. Each act, though subtle, contributed to a patterned coercion. Small objects and ritual gestures, otherwise mundane, revealed the architecture of power and fear. The packet illuminated the mechanics behind what it seemed spontaneous. Careful timing, coded symbols, and object placement orchestrated obedience. Townsfolk, initially trusting, slowly recognized discrepancies.
hesitant behavior, avoidance, and subtle signals of fear. Could this discovery finally force the town to confront the true extent of Parris's shadowed influence? The revelation slowly transformed perception. Scholars emphasize the danger of unquestioned authority cloaked in morality. Candlelight, mirrors, perfumed cloths, and pewter bowls were more than decorative. They were tools of psychological control. Awareness became essential. Adults documenting subtle signs, children noting gestures, and whispers circulating among servants all contributed to understanding the hidden hierarchy. Objects, scents, and rituals demonstrated how power could be exercised quietly yet profoundly. Public admiration was no shield. Unseen rituals could manipulate behavior and instill fear. Lessons from Salem highlight vigilance, observation, and questioning authority as safeguards against coercion. Even minor gestures, hand positions, folded cloths, tilted mirrors left lasting impressions. Scholars Miller and Upham argue that observing patterns, decoding subtle symbols, and understanding psychological architecture are crucial to preventing abuse. Authority and morality, when combined without scrutiny, can distort behavior and create environments where compliance is coerced rather than chosen. Candlelight flickered, objects whispered secrets, and children learned to navigate invisible rules. The town's slow awakening emphasized the importance of questioning rituals that seemed benign but carried weighty consequences. Historical study reveals that power, even cloaked in divine guidance, can dominate and shape behavior silently. The shadows of Salem remind us, authority unchecked, ritualized, and hidden can impose lasting influence long after the flames die.
And yet, despite awareness, the chambers remained shadows of control, waiting for the next unwary soul. Candles dimmed, mirrors reflected hesitant eyes. Perfumed cloths and arranged bowls spoke silently of control and fear. Authority wore the guise of virtue. Salem watched quietly, learning to observe. Behind closed doors, ritualized gestures and hidden objects preserved lessons in compliance, waiting for the moment they would be unveiled to all. A cold draft slipped under the heavy wooden door. Candles quivered against the dark-paneled walls. Could devotion mask obsession? Did power twist the mind unseen? Hidden ledgers and faint whispers recorded more than sermons ever could. The unseen watched, the objects obeyed, and Salem's shadows held unspeakable secrets. Parris's chamber was more than a study. It was a carefully orchestrated stage. Every object had purpose. Mirrors angled to catch subtle gestures, candles timed to flicker on key moments, and pewter bowls lined for silent rituals. Servants learned quickly, approach slowly, observe closely, and comply precisely. A girl's footstep could be noted, a glance recorded, a hesitation remembered. The Reverend's authority, public and spiritual, masked deeper compulsions. Behind the sermons, private rooms functioned as instruments of control. Perfumed cloths hinted at favor, bells dictated timing, and subtle marks on the floor guided positioning. Each consultation was choreographed to reinforce obedience, leaving children uneasy yet compliant. Parents were unaware. Outsiders only glimpsed sermons and communal prayers. Diaries later revealed the psychological architecture, repetition, observation, and silent scoring of behavior. Candlelight cast long shadows, mirrors multiplied movements, and objects seemed to whisper instructions. The chamber's design blurred morality and coercion, authority and manipulation, devotion and compulsion. Every consultation added another mark to the invisible ledger, the girls carrying lessons home without speaking a word. The problem was clear. Unchecked authority, disguised as spiritual guidance, created a silent system of domination. Who would notice first, and when would this invisible ledger be exposed? Accounts from town diaries describe careful notation of each session, initials, symbols, times. Candle flames highlighted subtle gestures. Perfumed cloths were laid out like coded messages. Bells chimed softly to dictate actions, marking favor or disapproval. Extended council sessions into the night became standard, though their content remained opaque. Parents sensed changes, children hesitant, flushed, avoiding eye contact. Historical sources, including Upham and Miller, document recurring patterns: mirrors angled to capture responses, pewter bowls as indicators, and subtle gestures serving as silent communication. The Reverend's observation was constant. Minute acts, the folding of a handkerchief, the tilt of a head, or a footstep, were noted, forming an invisible hierarchy. Even sermons conveyed coded reinforcement, messages cloaked in morality, yet hinting at compliance and vigilance. The children learned quickly. Adaptation was survival. Rituals repeated, leaving impressions stronger than words. Objects carried authority. Mirrors reflected alignment, candles timed obedience, and perfumed cloths rewarded compliance. Psychological tension grew as routines intensified. Townfolk noticed behavioral oddities: reluctance, nervous energy, whispered warnings. The pattern was clear: subtle manipulation enforced control. Each session's minutiae accumulated into a silent, powerful ledger of behavior, creating obedience without overt threat, but with pervasive psychological influence. How long could such meticulous orchestration of fear and ritual remain hidden from the town? Decades later, a bundle of ledgers surfaced. Initials, symbols, and notations corroborated whispers. Structured rituals were recorded meticulously. Candles positioned strategically, mirrors angled deliberately. Pewter bowls and perfumed cloths mapped patterns of obedience. Diaries described extended counseling sessions, documenting children's hesitations and responses. Even seemingly mundane objects carried coded messages. Bell chimes, the timing of candle flickers, and floor marks revealed orchestration. Witness accounts hinted at ritualized compliance, reinforcing the hidden hierarchy. Scholars Upham and Miller noted how subtle cues shaped behavior over time. Head tilts, hand folds, glances, and silent signals dictated the children's conduct. The ledgers revealed the architecture behind manipulation. Objects, rituals, and codes created a silent system of authority, guiding children without overt instruction. Parents, initially oblivious, began noticing altered behaviors, quiet hesitations, careful movements, and unusual attentiveness. Public sermons remained untouched, projecting spiritual authority, while private chambers conducted psychological experiments in subtlety and control. The evidence connected notes, objects, and rituals into a coherent framework of coercion. Each item, mirror, candle, pewter bowl, was part of a calculated design. Compliance was recorded, measured, and reinforced. Patterns repeated, leaving lasting effects. Could the town finally confront the hidden manipulation before it claimed more victims in silence? The ledgers, once discovered, transformed understanding of Parris's private methods. Authority cloaked in morality was revealed as manipulation. Candles, mirrors, bells, and perfumed cloths became instruments of subtle coercion. Observation and documentation highlighted the danger of unexamined power. Adults and children, once silent, now understood the psychological architecture designed to enforce compliance. Small gestures, tilts of the head, folding of cloth, bell chimes carried weighty consequences. Scholars Miller and Upham emphasized vigilance, decoding silent symbols, observing patterns, and questioning ritualized authority are key to preventing abuse. Public admiration provided no shield. The private chamber dictated behavior invisibly. Lessons from Salem illustrate how unchecked authority, ritualized and hidden, can dominate silently. Candlelight flickered, mirrors multiplied gestures, and objects whispered instructions long after sessions ended. Children internalized lessons, adults observed cautiously, and the town learned to question what seemed innocuous. Even minor, ritualized acts shaped behavior over time. Authority and morality, combined without scrutiny, can distort, manipulate, and enforce compliance. The shadows of Salem remain instructive. Patterns of obedience, subtle coercion, and ritualized control
leave lasting impressions. Understanding the hidden architecture of influence is essential to prevent repetition. Lessons endured, echoing through time, reminding that vigilance is the safeguard against silent domination.
Yet in the quiet chambers, objects waited, silent and patient, ready for the next cycle of obedience. Mirrors reflected anxious faces, candles flickered with judgment, and perfumed cloths hinted at unseen authority. Every gesture was observed, recorded, and measured. Salem's shadows held lessons in control and compliance. Authority's veneer could mislead, but hidden rituals revealed the true mechanisms shaping behavior in silence and shadow. A single key turned in a rusted lock. Shadows stretched across the chamber floor. Could sermons conceal obsession? Did sacred authority hide compulsion? Objects whispered instructions only the observant could decode. Candles, mirrors, and ledgers held secrets Salem dared not speak aloud. Silence carried the weight of unseen transgressions. The Reverend's study was meticulously arranged. Each object, each reflection, each flicker of candlelight served dual purposes: decorum for visitors, surveillance for insiders. Mirrors angled at corners allowed observation of subtle movements. Bells chimed softly, signaling not prayers, but adherence. Pewter bowls lined up like instruments, recording compliance invisibly. Perfumed cloths marked distinctions between favor and warning. Children learned instinctively. Every hesitation mattered. A frown could invite scrutiny. A tilt of the head was scored. Parents saw nothing. Outsiders only glimpsed sermons. Private sessions, however, became mechanisms of silent power. Ritualized actions, folding cloths, timed gestures, candle placement dictated responses. The Reverend observed closely, recording reactions with near-clinical precision. Diaries later confirmed. Repetition and pattern reinforced obedience without overt instruction. The study was both sanctuary and stage, hiding subtle coercion beneath moral instruction. Authority was unquestioned, its power absolute. Objects dictated behavior silently, leaving impressions deeper than words. Subtlety masked control. Who would uncover the ledger first, and what truths would the shadows reveal? Town diaries recount detailed observations. Candle flames highlighted minute gestures. Mirrors reflected unspoken signals. Bells chimed in coded sequences. Pewter bowls and perfumed cloths indicated standing, compliance, or disfavor. Extended counseling sessions occurred late into the night. Children carried the lessons home, silent yet marked. Scholars Upham and Miller documented consistent patterns. Folded hands, slight head tilts, careful foot placements, all scored and memorized. Rituals repeated, creating psychological tension, shaping behavior invisibly. Parents noticed changes, nervous glances, hesitations, whispered warnings. The Reverend's authority remained unchallenged in public. Sermons projected spiritual guidance, while private chambers conducted exercises in control. Objects became agents. Mirrors multiplied gestures. Candles timed attention. Bells marked obedience. Cloths rewarded or warned. Observations recorded in invisible ledgers. Every action measured and repeated. Patterns became entrenched, leaving lasting effects on children and adults alike. Behavioral modifications occurred silently, reinforcing hierarchy without confrontation. Compliance became instinctive, obedience internalized. Townsfolk remained unaware of the true structure, seeing only outward propriety. The Reverend's influence extended far beyond sermons, touching behavior, psychology, and perception. How long would this invisible network of authority remain undetected? Years later, hidden ledgers surfaced, initials, symbols, and coded marks aligned with historical accounts. Candles, mirrors, and pewter bowls recorded not devotion, but compliance. Diaries described meticulous observation of children's hesitation, posture, and responses. Even small actions carried weight. The folding of a cloth, a glance, a step. Bell chimes and timed candle flickers formed a coded language of control. Witness statements confirmed ritualized reinforcement of hierarchy. Scholars Upham and Miller emphasized patterns of silent power. Mirrors reflected subtle movements. Pewter bowls indicated behavior. Candles dictated attention. Cloths communicated favor or warning. Private sessions were orchestrated with near military precision. The public saw sermons. The private chamber executed psychological experiments in subtle coercion. The ledger revealed the design. Actions measured. Reactions recorded. Compliance reinforced invisibly. Ritualized obedience had become a silent system of control, leaving enduring psychological impressions. The evidence dropped like a shadow across historical understanding. Objects and rituals were not passive, but active agents of domination. Children internalized lessons, parents remained oblivious, and public authority continued unchallenged. What had seemed benign in candlelight and mirrors was in fact an architecture of subtle coercion. Could the town confront these hidden rituals before more harm emerged? The ledgers, once unearthed, transformed historical perspective. Authority cloaked in morality was revealed as systematic manipulation. Candles, mirrors, bells, pewter bowls, and perfumed cloths became instruments of silent coercion. Observation, repetition, and documentation highlighted the danger of unexamined power. Adults and children, once passive, now understood the architecture of control. Small gestures, tilts of the head, folded cloths, bell chimes carried consequences. Scholars Miller and Upham stressed vigilance. Patterns of ritualized compliance and object-based influence required scrutiny. Public reverence provided no shield. The private chambers dictated behavior invisibly. Lessons endured. Even minor ritualized acts shaped long-term conduct. Authority combined with ritual, unchallenged, could distort morality and enforce obedience silently. Salem's shadows offered enduring insight. Behavior could be guided by objects, signals, and invisible hierarchies, leaving lasting impressions. The chamber, once silent, now echoed lessons in control. Candlelight flickered, mirrors multiplied gestures, and objects whispered instructions across generations. Children adapted, adults observed cautiously, and the town learned to question the surface of morality. Even subtle influence left profound consequences. Understanding hidden mechanisms of authority is essential to prevent repetition. Yet in quiet corners, candles waited. Mirrors reflected, and the architecture of control lingered, patient for the next cycle. Candles flickered, mirrors captured anxious movements, and perfumed cloths marked unseen authority. Salem's shadows revealed hidden manipulation and silent coercion. Authority could be moral in appearance, yet oppressive in execution. Objects, rituals, and repetition shaped behavior in ways the town would never forget. Silence often spoke louder than words. The church bell tolled as fog swallowed the town square. Secrets lingered behind locked doors. Could piety hide obsession? Were sermons a mask for something darker? Ledger pages whispered names and rituals. Candlelight glinted off mirrors and pewter. Salem held its breath, awaiting the truth that no one dared voice aloud. A storm raged outside, but within the Reverend's chamber, a different tempest unfolded. The room, dimly lit by trembling candlelight, contained mirrors positioned for observation, pewter bowls indicating status, and cloths perfumed to mark favor. Children entered with silent obedience, adults unaware of the subtle signals guiding behavior. Each movement, every glance was recorded in mind and ledger. Sermons continued, projecting authority and moral righteousness, while private sessions exercised meticulous control. Shadows stretched across the floor, echoing the unspoken rules. Mirrors doubled observations. Candle flames timed reactions, and bells marked compliance. Perfumed cloths differentiated reward from reprimand without a word spoken. The chamber, a sanctuary for moral instruction in public view, became a laboratory of psychological manipulation behind closed doors. Observers noted patterns: folded hands, careful steps, lowered eyes, tiny hesitations. These were not merely manners, but measured compliance. Diaries later confirmed the Reverend's obsession with documenting and influencing subtle behavior. His control was invisible, systemic, and relentless. Salem residents believed sermons shaped souls. In truth, the chamber orchestrated obedience, leaving children conditioned, adults blind, and authority absolute. How long could such invisible domination remain undiscovered before collapsing under its own weight? Historical notes surfaced decades later. Diaries, coded ledgers, and witness testimonies revealed the depth of orchestrated control. Candles timed responses, mirrors expanded observation angles. Bells, once associated with worship, signaled obedience, while perfumed cloths marked distinctions of favor or reprimand. Children learned instinctively. Slight hesitation invited scrutiny. Minor gestures carried consequences. Scholars Upham and Miller documented the system's precision. Repetition ensured internalized compliance. Subtle manipulation governed conduct without overt punishment. Behavioral patterns were reinforced with psychological tools. Reflections multiplied gestures, pewter bowls indicated standing, candlelight dictated focus, and cloths communicated silent approval or warning. The Reverend's meticulous recordings ensured long-term behavioral conditioning. Parents unaware of the complexity trusted outward morality. Sermons reinforced spiritual guidance, while private chamber dictated subtle compulsion. Town residents observed only superficial obedience. Behind closed doors, ritualized power imposed structured conformity. Actions were measured, reactions scored, and children internalized lessons that would shape their adult conduct. The invisible system persisted, silently enforcing hierarchy and authority. Objects, rituals, and repetition worked together to form a network of coercion, leaving psychological imprints that endured beyond Salem's foggy streets. Could the delicate balance of obedience and silence withstand exposure, or was the hidden architecture doomed to unravel? A sealed box, forgotten for decades, surfaced in a town archive. Inside, the ledger recorded initials, coded symbols, and annotations detailing observation protocols. Candlelight arrangements, mirror positions, and bell sequences were cataloged meticulously. Perfumed cloths, once thought ceremonial, marked compliance and warning. Diaries described precise gestures, folded hands, tilts of the head, hesitant steps. Children were observed in repetition, conditioned to obey silently. Parents remained oblivious to the psychological architecture in play. Scholars Miller and Upham noted that private sessions, supposed moral instruction, were structured with near-military precision. Ritualized acts reinforced hierarchy invisibly. Compliance became internalized, moral piety a mask for psychological control. Objects were active agents. Mirrors reflected subtle movement, pewter bowls indicated behavior, candlelight dictated focus, and cloths communicated silent approval or warning. The evidence revealed systematic manipulation, authority cloaked as morality, coercion hidden beneath ritual. What seemed innocuous in candlelit study rooms was an intricate web of invisible control, shaping behavior, perception, and obedience. The ledger, like a shadow, exposed the depths of obsession and the extent of power abuse. How many lives had been shaped, twisted, or broken before Salem dared to uncover these secrets?
The unearthing of ledgers, diaries, and coded objects transformed understanding of Salem's moral landscape. Authority had been exercised invisibly through mirrors,
candles, bells, pewter bowls, and perfumed cloths. Children internalized control. Adults remained oblivious. Moral piety masked obsession. Scholars stressed the lesson. Objects and ritual can govern behavior more effectively than words alone. Repetition, observation, and subtle signals enforced obedience, leaving enduring psychological impressions. Salem's shadows demonstrated that authority, even when cloaked in morality, could be coercive, manipulative, and damaging. The chamber, once silent, echoed lessons in domination. Candlelight flickered over mirrors reflecting gestures. Bells timed attention. Cloths marked favor and warning. Psychological patterns became ingrained. Moral performance hid subtle coercion. The town's reverence for sermons provided no protection against the private mechanisms of control. Modern parallels emerge when authority is unquestioned, rituals are followed blindly, and objects dictate conduct. Understanding hidden mechanisms of power is crucial to prevent repetition. Even subtle influence leaves profound consequences. Salem's lessons endure. Observe, question, and uncover the unseen structures shaping behavior. Silence and shadows reveal more than sermons ever could. And yet, somewhere in quiet rooms, candles still flicker, mirrors still reflect, and the architecture of control patiently awaits the next generation.
Candles, mirrors, and perfumed cloths outlasted memory. Salem's secrets revealed that ritualized obedience, object-based signals, and hidden authority shaped behavior silently. Authority can appear moral, yet operate coercively. Even centuries later, the echoes warned, watch carefully, question rituals, and uncover the structures silently guiding conduct.